Good afternoon. We are so excited. We are so excited. We are so excited to see each and every one of you here on this Tuesday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We have an amazing topic for us to grapple with on today. Now, I know I say this every Tuesday, but for real, this Tuesday, I mean it. This topic is awesome and amazing. There are two words that we often use interchangeably. Those two words are healing and wellness. We often believe that those two words have the similar or same meanings, and actually they don't. So, our focus on today is what are the differences between healing versus wellness? What is the difference between healing versus wellness? This is the topic that we are going to grapple with today. We invite you to grab pen and paper. Make sure you have pen and paper as we're going to be highlighting a number of resources that we are going to talk about on today. The particular Bible passage that we want to invite you to turn to is the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, verses 43 to 48. That's Luke chapter 8, verses 43 to 48. March is Women's History Month. We know that. And this is the time where we celebrate the wonderful work of our sisters. And so, this biblical passage that we're going to highlight today takes into consideration the plight of a particular woman. I hope you have pen and paper handy. We're going to look at Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, beginning at verse 43. And I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Now, there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. And though she had spent all she had on physicians, no one could cure her. She came up behind him being Jesus, and touched the fringe of his clothes, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. Then Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surround you and press in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I noticed that power had gone out from me." When the woman saw that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Two particular scriptures we're going to highlight that we want you to pay close attention to is verse 47 and verse 48. There's a transition that happens in verse 47 and verse 48. Notice in verse 47, the text says, when the woman saw that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling and falling down with him. She declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately, here we go, healed. But Jesus doesn't say, "Your faith has healed you." Jesus responds in verse 48, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Notice those two different words. Those two different words. She experienced healing by touching Jesus' garment, but she experiences wellness as a result of something totally different. So let's talk. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this scripture. First things first, there's some important learnings that we want to highlight about this scripture. First and foremost, I remember Before I was a part of the illustrious United Church of Christ, I was born and raised Baptist. And oh my gosh, we had to attend this. If you were a kid, we had to attend this special seminar or workshop or retreat every Friday night. It was called Baptist Training Unit. BTU. All the kids had to go to BTU. It wasn't optional. You had to go to BTU. It wasn't it wasn't something that you could say, nah, I don't feel like going. I'm tired or I've got schoolwork. Nope. It was understood that you had to go to Baptist training unit. And early on in Baptist training unit, we learned about this particular story in Luke chapter 8. We learned about this particular woman. However, something we never learned was what was this woman's name. We never learned this woman's name. We learned that she struggled. We learned that she had a particular issue, but we never learned what her name was. We know other people's names in this story. We know Jesus' name. We know Peter's name, but why is it this woman's name goes silent? Growing up in Baptist training unit, we were taught as kids early on that this is the woman who has an issue of blood.
Mhm.
That's the only way we would refer to her. We never referred to her by her first name. We never referred to her by her last name. We didn't even refer to her by the particular town or country that she was born and raised in. All we simply knew was this is the woman who has an issue of blood. Isn't that strange? Isn't that interesting that we are never taught what this woman's name is? This is how we define people today.
Mm.
Sometimes we define people today by their issues. We don't recognize people by their character, their personality type, their sense of spirituality, or their faith. We don't recognize people by their courage, their tenacity, their dedication, their loyalty. We don't recognize people by their intelligence, their wisdom, their insight. We don't even recognize people by their zest, their essence, that thing that makes you excited to be around them. Nope. We typically define people by their issues, that which they struggle with, that which they can't help, right? We say sometimes, hey, there's old blind Bartimaeus right there. Or we say something like, oh, that's alcoholic Sam over there because Sam wrestles with alcohol. Or we say, ah, that's crazy Kanye West because of his mental health issues. In some sense, this text, first and foremost, wants to highlight for us hmm, how do we refrain from or resist the notion of defining people by their issues? How do we say to ourselves, it's not fair, it's not right, it's not ethical, it's not moral to simply refer to people by their issues? In some sense, we also have to reflect on when are the times in our lives when we've been defined by our issues. If you were to reflect right now on your life, has there ever been a particular issue that someone defined you by? Has there been a particular health challenge that someone said, hmm, and they started referring to you by the health challenge, something that you could not help? How did that make you feel? You probably were left feeling sad, scared, frustrated. This text invites us to reflect on how do we, first and foremost, be careful that we are not defining people by their particular issue. Why is it we don't know this woman's name? Why is it we know everybody else's name in this story, but we don't know her particular name? Naming is something that's very interesting. I'm reminded in African tradition, oftentimes in many African cultures and countries, when a baby is initially born, they are not given a name. There is much prayer and discernment, first and foremost, before they are named. And second, through prayer and discernment, The name that is given to them is based on what should be, what the ancestors and God revealed as the divine occupation of that baby. That's right. Many names in many names in African many African cultures and communities is symbolic of the person's particular mission or purpose in life. And so naming is very, very important. Let's pause for a second. Do you know what your name means? I would invite you. If you don't know what your name means, I would invite you to simply Google this, right? With in the wonderful technology age of Google, you can Google, hey, what does Sarah mean? Or what does Ardella mean? Or what does Samuel mean? And in some sense, then begin to live into the mission or purpose of what that name represents for you. In some sense, by this woman not being recognized by her name, it's almost as if her mission and purpose is also not recognized. Isn't that ironic? By not naming her, we may be erasing her mission, her purpose, her value to the community. You see, the second aspect about naming is naming was important not just because it highlighted your mission and purpose in life, but in the true spirit of African tradition. It highlighted how your mission and purpose must connect to the larger African community. We don't just have an individualistic mission and purpose. We have a mission and purpose that is based on community. How is what you are called to be and do connected to helping the village, the larger community around you? And so, in some sense, it's almost as if by not calling her name in this text, we are also not acknowledging what was her benefit to the larger community. It seems as if we are, in some sense, erasing her from erasing her from the community, erasing her contribution from the community. It is so important, family, to make sure people recognize you by your name because they're not just simply identifying you, but they are also acknowledging your gift, your contribution to the larger community. So, another lesson or reflective point for us to highlight in these moments is how do we make sure we are being recognized by our contribution? Also, this text makes us begin to wrestle with who are those who go nameless in our community? Who are, because this is Women's History Month, who are the sisters that are not recognized by their names? Who are the sisters that are not recognized by their names? Who are the sisters that are not recognized by their names? Hmm. Hmm, 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 hmm. Who are the sisters that are not recognized by their mission and purpose in life? Who are the sisters that are not recognized by their mission and purpose in life? What do we do about that? How do we call forth the names of all of those who go nameless in our communities today? Interestingly enough, you've heard this text time and time again. This woman begins to say, in some sense, I've been sick with this particular disease for 12 long years. No one in the community has helped me. I went to the finest doctors and the physicians and the trauma experts, and no one could seem to fix my issue, but I'll go to Jesus. In some sense, this woman still uses her human agency to realize that uh, there is something else that she can do. Before we move forward, let's pause for a second. If anybody has any thought before we move into the second half of our story.
Yeah, Jeanette says that her name Jeanette means God is gracious. That's interesting because that's what John means. That Yahweh has been gracious. Uh,
Uh,
yeah. It also um oh Tamiko she says her name Tamiko means child of the people or many beautiful child or children. Oh, great. But this is good work because this also goes to when we get to this when we start pointing out the difference between healing and wellness. That part of her unwellness is is not being identified and recognized in a patriarchal culture that sees women as property. And
uh,
part of is not just the blood, the issue of the hemorrhaging, and Franz Fanon and some others pointed out that this is common among these things are common among oppressed people, that the stress and the tension of living under oppression causes bodily reactions like hemorrhaging blood and things like that, that come out of living in such a context. And so it is incredible. And finally, Kathleen said her name, Kathleen, means pure. Uh,
ah,
last used in 1979, less than 5 girls born with that name in 2021. Kathleen is the way you spell it, Kathleen. And so, wow. Okay. So, yeah, good stuff.
the next reflective. Thank you everybody for chiming in. The next reflective question that this text causes us to grapple with is: are you being true to your name, living out the mission and purpose of your name? So yes, we now know the meanings of our name, but then the harder question for us that we all have to do personal self-reflection and an inventory, personal inventory in reflecting on is: are we living out the mission and purpose of our name? Are we living out the mission and purpose of our name? What do you have to do to live out the mission and purpose of your name? What is God calling you to do to make the definition of your name real? That becomes the next reflective question that we have to, in some sense, grapple with, family. Our story highlights an interesting theme, if you will. According to this particular text, this woman reaches out and she touches Jesus, hem of his garment. She touches the hem of his garment. And our text says, in just touching the hem, power leaves Jesus. Think about that for a second. She never touched his body. In just touching the hem of the clothes he wore, he noticed that power had went out of him. Isn't that interesting? Have you ever thought about that specific detail for a moment? What is the impact of just touching these clothes that Jesus is wearing? Not necessarily even his physical body, but just the garment that he is wearing. What if we were to reflect on the ways in which even the clothes we wear, the materials, the fabrics we wear, carry a certain particular power in them? Have you ever thought about that for a second? I'm
That's
going to
good.
pause there for a moment.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Please say more about that. That's good. That's good.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I go see a therapist as I recommend everybody go have therapy. And two issues about this. One day I was talking to my therapist saying, hey, there's a particular opportunity that I want to apply for. I want to apply for a new job. And the therapist said, okay, what can I do to help you? Or how can I support you? And I said, all right, I want to know, what should I wear? Tell me about the particular clothes or patterns that I should put on. And the therapist said, when is your birthday? And I said, my birthday is in April. And the therapist said, according to science, particular colors that look great on you is something around fire colors, red, gold, or black. And I said, now listen, I'm just asking you to help me around a job interview. I'm not asking for us to talk about demonic astrology or anything like that. And he said something because he's African centered. He said, first of all, it's not the study of the stars and the moon as a part of your African culture and heritage. It's not demonic. I said, okay. He said, Benjamin Banneker was not demonic. I said, okay, fair enough. He said, now listen, the idea is when you put these particular colors on, you will begin to walk in a particular power according to your psyche. I said, what? He said, yes, particular colors that you wear, given, for example, your astrological sign, will cause you to feel better or feel different in a particular during a particular day or time. And I thought about it. I said, okay, so I tested it out. Sometimes I wear particular colors when I'm struggling with low self-esteem. I may wake up and say, okay, I'm going to wear black, or I'm going to wear red, or I'm going to wear something gold. And then I went to an African shop one day to buy some particular uh, mud cloth and particular African garb. And a gentleman by the name of Ibrahim at the Jine in
Mhm.
Chicago says to me, he says, do you have a special event or an occasion coming up? And I say, yes. And he goes to the back and he brings out particular materials. And he says, Danielle, he sits me down. He says, Danielle, in many African cultures, we believe that the particular materials of certain garments carries particular energies or spirits or power. I said, you don't say? He said, yes. He says, most people don't know, in some sense, depending on the particular garment you wear, you will contain or hold on to particular energy or spirits or power. I said, oh my God, I never knew that. He says, yes, these fabrics are not just a superficial materialistic dynamic that people are donning. Most of the time, many people of particular African cultures have understood because they've learned and studied and are accepting of this notion that there are particular fabrics that will make you feel a particular way depending on your particular mood in some sense. And I says, oh my gosh, he gives me an example. He teaches me something. He says, there's a reason why, and I never even thought about this before, and maybe you have never thought of this before either. He said, there's a reason why when a baby is a newborn baby, what particular fabric do we use of a blanket to wrap that baby in? Oftentimes we use wool or cotton because this notion of this baby being wrapped in wool or cotton will give the baby a sense of security. Wool represents security, and cotton represents stability in some sense. And so, one reflective activity is you can study the meanings of materials. There are some materials that represent power. There's other materials that represent stability or security. There's some materials that represent freedom of expression and exploration and liberation and freedom. I don't know if you've ever thought about that for a second, but it is believed that in this particular Luke chapter 8 text, the particular material that Jesus uh, was wearing was of a particular African fabric that represented security and power in some sense. And so many African scholars have read this message, this particular passage, through the lens of not just that the fabric had power because Jesus is powerful and Jesus is wearing this outfit, but this text, for those who study African art and design in particular, many have said, no, 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 this particular material in this outfit that Jesus was wearing, from an African centered perspective, was a fabric that represented, in some sense, power, and in some sense gave off power. I'll pause there for a moment. I know I said a lot right there.
Oh, that's real good. That is, in fact, that puts a flip the script on a European saying that many people, in particular men, have held on to: the clothes make the man, or the clothes make the person. When in reality, the person makes the clothes, because it's spiritual. We're dealing with, we're looking at things out of nature, and there is a symbiotic and interrelatedness that African people recognize that we have with nature, and colors are part of nature. And so there are certain colors that absolutely, Thomas Dixon brought me back when he went to Ghana. He brought back a red, it wasn't a quilt, but it was a red throw over piece. And he pointed out it was from the Maasai tribe.
Mm.
It was red with some black stripes in it. And the Maasai use that color and that cloth when they're out in the bush, because it has a power to it that lets, when they go lion hunting, it sends off power to the lion, that this person is coming in power. It's fascinating, you know what I mean?
Wow, wow, wow. No, you're right, because I'm even told that in Africa, in many African cultures and countries and customs, particular kings and queens only wear a certain fabric that
Mhm,
nobody else in a particular tribe or culture or country is allowed to wear,
mhm,
for this reason. Most
mhm,
definitely, most definitely,
mhm.
most definitely,
Yeah,
most definitely. And so, interestingly enough, we see that Jesus says to this woman, after he realizes that power has gone out of him, he says to this woman, "Hey, daughter, your faith has made you well." This should cause you to scratch your head for a moment, because according to the text, as I highlighted earlier, verse 47 says, after she touches the hem of Jesus' garment, she experiences healing. But he doesn't say or use the word healing in the next verse, verse 48. He says, your faith has made you well. There is a difference between healing and wellness. These terms are not synonymous. There's a difference between healing and wellness. Healing is represented as The process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. The process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. Hold that definition in your mind for a second. Hold that definition in your mind for a second because the difference is wellness has a completely different meaning. Wellness has a completely different meaning. Wellness is the state of being in good health, especially as an actively pursued goal. The state of being in good health, especially as an actively pursued goal. What do we mean? What do we mean? What do we mean? The analogy that I like to use in some sense is you can take a pot, a ceramic pot, a beautiful ceramic pot, and you can accidentally drop it on the floor and it shatters in several pieces. Now that pot is broken. You can take the time to pick that pot up, pick all the pieces up, glue the pieces back together, and fix the pot so that now the pot is healed. However, as you look at the pot, even though you've taken the pieces and glued them back together, if you look at the pot, you can still see traces of where the fractures or the broken pieces once were. You can see and use your finger to trace where were all the spaces and places that were broken in the pot. Wellness represents the fact that I am healed and you can't even see my cracks anymore. That's the difference between healing and wellness. Put another way, an image that we lift up is this particular image to help us see it a little bit differently. Healing means the absence of both physical and mental diseases. Healing represents health and the absence of both physical and mental diseases. Healing means you're not sick, but wellness represents the state of living a healthy lifestyle. The state of living a healthy lifestyle. So people could be healed but not have wellness. People can be healed but not have wellness. Wellness is one step up. Wellness is what we should all ascribe to have because healing could be temporary, but wellness is more permanent. Wellness is long lasting, whereas healing, that's something that more temporary in some sense. It is believed that wellness is only talked about twice in the gospel. The first time wellness, or one time wellness is talked about, is in this Luke chapter 8 text, where Jesus says to this woman, "Daughter, go in peace, your faith has made you well." But wellness is also talked about in communication with a gentleman who sits at the pool of Bethesda, waiting for the pool to be stirred up. There's a gentleman who sits at the pool of Bethesda, waiting for the pool to be stirred up. And before he can get into the pool, someone jumps ahead of him while the pool is stirred. And then, unfortunately, he's not able to make it to the pool in time. And he sits by this pool of Bethesda for 38 years. Jesus comes along and asks a simple question: do you want to be made well? That's the second time wellness is mentioned in the Gospels in, in some sense. And so the question for us becomes today, how do we push past simply just wanting to be healed and move more so to embracing wellness? What does wellness look like? As our definitions highlighted earlier, wellness is the state of moving into perpetual good health. Wellness is the state of moving into perpetual good health. And we often measure our wellness through the use of a wellness wheel. We measure our wellness through the use of a wellness wheel. These are all the components of wellness, 8 in particular. If you were trying to discern, okay, how do I know if I'm healed or I'm well? How do you know if you're healed or you're well? You'd have to reflect on these 8 categories in particular. And you must be doing good in all of these categories simultaneously. Wellness looks like doing inventory of your spirituality, your emotional state, your environment, your finances, your intellect, your occupation, your physical health, and your social health. So let's talk about these in particular. Let's go one by one. First and foremost, we lift up in wellness having a good spiritual health, meaning, are you able to find meaning in life events or demonstrate individual purpose or live a life that reflects your values and beliefs? For your emotional health, you will achieve wellness if you have a positive attitude or high self esteem, a strong sense of self, and the ability to recognize and share a wide range of feelings with others in a constructive way. Environmental health means being aware of the interactions between the environment, community, and yourself, and behave in ways that care for each of these responsibly. Wellness means incorporating financial health, living within your means financially, and learning to manage your finances for the short and long term. Wellness means intellectual health, being open to new ideas, being creative, being able to think critically, and seek out new challenges. Wellness also means studying people's occupation, studying your occupation. Do you seek to have a career that's interesting, enjoyable, meaningful, and that contributes to the larger society? Having wellness means being physically healthy. How do you take care of your body for optimal health and functioning? And last but not least, true wellness means having good social relationships where you are building relationships with others, you're dealing with conflict appropriately, and you're connecting to a positive social community. Which one of these jumps out for you? Let us do inventory. First, we'd have to reflect on which one of these jumps out for you. Do you know that all of these 8 dynamics encompass wellness? Does one in particular shock you that you didn't know was central to wellness? First, let me ask, which one of these shocked you that you may say, wow, I didn't know that that had anything to do with wellness? Anyone in particular?
We haven't gotten any response so far, but wow. For me, the environmental one stood out. That
Wow.
kind of shocked me.
Why did that one shock you?
You know, it's interesting because I'm conscious of, the environment and it's a necessity for us and for sustaining us. But as far as our um personal wholeness and wellness, it didn't connect until I saw this wheel and you started talking about it. And now, now I'm getting it now, that, the environment and the environment that you're in, the ecosystem and the environment that you place yourself in are strategic for wholeness. Now it's hitting me. It didn't, when I looked at it, I said environment. Well, I almost saw it as a separate issue and not a part of the makeup of our wellness.
Thank you so much for that. That one shocked me too. It made me begin to think about what are the ways in which people who are unfortunately poor, living in particular communities where there is poor air quality,
Mhm.
or living in particular communities where there is a uh, sanitation site
Mhm.
or a garbage dump. I was trying to think of the professional way to say it. Um, where there's a disposable sanitation
Mhm.
nearby that unfortunately corrupts the air. It makes me wonder about how that contributes to hurting people's well-being.
Mhm.
I can't help but to think about traveling on the Bishop Ford
Mhm.
Expressway and around 130th Street.
Mhm.
There is the streets and sanitation garbage disposal area right there. And sometimes when I'm driving on the Bishop Ford and I drive past this area, there's a stench in the air that I'm often shocked about, and I have to do something like roll up my windows or turn my AC on to get rid of this stench. And I'm struck by how people who live in this particular area or community, they have to smell that smell repeatedly. And so what impact does that play on their sense of wellness, um,
Mhm.
in some sense? That was very shocking for me too. I
Mhm.
I
I
was oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying I patrolled Altgale Gardens for a number of years and patrolling in a police car, it was just, in the summertime, it's horrendous at times. It was just horrendous. And I'm just there for 8 hours a day. And there, the people were living there, it's horrendous. It's built on a landfill in the first place, Altgale Garden. And then you have the waste dumps all around it.
That is that is terrible. That is terrible. And then we wonder why little Sam or little Sarah goes to school and can't concentrate or
Mhm.
can't focus in school. It's all connected.
Mhm.
It's all connected. Something else that was shocking for me, in addition to the environment, that I never thought about is your finances and
Mm.
how finances are connected to wellness.
Mhm.
I could pretty much understand everything else, the emotional, spiritual, social, physical, occupational, and intellectual, but environment and finances, really, those two really stuck out for me. I had never thought about the ways in which the state of your finances
Mhm.
dictates or impacts or influences your wellness. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I grew up poor. And what are the ways in which growing up in poverty contributes to you feeling
Mhm.
not feeling well
Mhm.
in some sense. I'm in these moments thinking of the television show Good Time and the
Mhm.
state of their wellness based on their unfortunate lack of adequate financial resources to just provide basic necessities. And so this wheel We are encouraged to take an inventory of our lives. We are encouraged, we are encouraged to discern, to reflect on, are we reaching the full potential by understanding the interconnectedness of each aspect of our life? Are we reaching our full potential by understanding the interconnectedness of each aspect of our life? So, the second learning about this wellness wheel is that each piece impacts the other pieces. Each piece impacts the other pieces. So, in some sense, if you are not healthy in one or two of these eight dynamics, all the other pieces or areas of your life will also be impacted in some sense. By Jesus saying to this woman, your faith has made you well, what Jesus is actually saying to this woman in verse 48 of this Luke chapter 8 text is that I am going to give you balance in all eight of these areas so that in all eight of these areas, you're not going to struggle. Okay, so let's pause for a second. Let me connect some dots. Let me connect some dots for a second. This woman has a physical ailment. She is bleeding. She has an issue of blood, as we learned in Baptist training unit. All she is suffering from is just this one particular area or dynamic in her life that is causing her pain. But when Jesus says, because of your faith in reaching out and touching the hem of my garment, I'm going to give you wellness. The celebratory notion in this text that's often overlooked if we don't understand the true definition of wellness is that in some sense, Jesus is giving her more than what she asked for. Jesus is not just concerned about the physical space and place of her body and fixing that or giving her physical healing, but because of her faith, she gets social healing. Because of her faith, she gets spiritual healing. Because of her faith, she gets emotional healing. Because of her faith, she gets environmental healing. Because of her faith, she gets financial healing. Because of her faith, she gets intellectual healing. Because of her faith, she gets occupational healing. And so we have to begin to grapple with this notion that this woman is not just given physical healing, but she's given wellness so that all eight parts of her being and her essence and of who she is also healed. This is what makes Jesus' statement powerful to this woman. This is what makes his statement so powerful. We should all strive for wellness in all eight areas of our life, not just to experience healing in one or two or three spaces in our life, but we should all strive for wellness in all areas of our life. Think about that for a second. What would your life look like if you experienced wellness in all, because all eight of these areas were healed? What would your life look like if you experienced healthiness in all eight of these areas? So now you are well. Technically, we need to be careful of our language. Technically, when we say, my soul has made me well, the declaration, or when we say my soul is well, the declaration that we are really proclaiming is that I have found healthiness in all eight areas of my life.
Mhm.
Think about that for a second. When we say it is well with my soul, this is really a proclamation that we have achieved healthiness in all 8 areas of our life.
Mm.
Think about that for a second. I'll pause there for a minute.
Yeah, this is good. Kathleen put the word balanced, and somebody else wants to get the wheel. So yeah, please send it to me so I can get it to other folk.
Okay.
I want
Okay.
to add, when you can add one more instance, because when blind Bartimaeus met Jesus, Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well." So there are 3 instances. Um,
Oh, I forgot about that one. Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
and there, when you were talking about the broken pot, I was thinking about the Japanese pottery kintsugi, where what they
Yes.
do is they put that gold where the cracks were, so that it's better than it was in many, before it got broken. And then finally, this points out something that has has been dear to me, that whenever we go through a traumatic health challenge, we should have a therapist,
Yes.
because we may get through the traumatic health challenge and become physically healed, but the trauma of it still resonates within us. So we may have some relief, but we're not released, you know,
Ah,
and that's where a therapist comes in. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Ah, this is great. So we want to ask you, family, your homework assignment. Your homework assignment is to take this wellness wheel. Take this wellness wheel and begin to reflect on, how do I become healthy in all 8 of these particular areas? First, you're going to do an inventory. You're going to say to yourself, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least, 5 being the most, what rating would I give to each one of these? Each one of these. So let's do this really quickly, family, in the last few moments that we have together. Let's do this really quickly. As you look at each, as you look at each part of this wellness wheel, let's go slow. Write on your paper numbers 1 to 5. 1 meaning the least, 5 meaning the most. Let's start with spiritual. How is your spiritual health? What rating would you give that on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being the least, meaning not good, 5 being the most good, meaning the best. Now let's do that for our emotional health. What rating will we give our emotional health? Now let's look at our environmental health. What rating would you give your environmental health? Now, think about your financial health. What rating would you give your financial health? Think about your intellectual health. What rating would you give your intellectual health? Think about your occupational health. What rating would you give your occupational health? Think about your physical health. What rating would you give your physical health? think about your social health. What rating would you give your social health? Now, look at all 8 of your ratings and think about which ones did you primarily give 1s or 2s to. That's what you would do next. You would look at which ones did you primarily give 1s and 2s to, which means you have to really work on improving all the areas that you gave a 1 or 2 to. All the ones that you gave a 1 or 2 to. And you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm promising myself that I'm going to actively work on moving these 1s and 2s in these particular areas to at least 4s. At least 4s. And then ask yourself, what exactly do you have to do? What exactly do you have to do? What exactly do you have to do? To make all those ones all the ones you scored, all the characteristics you scored as 1s, to move those to 4 or 5. What do you learn about what you have to do differently? What's an action plan? What's next steps? This becomes pivotal for us to grapple with. What are next steps? This becomes pivotal for us to grapple with. No judgment, no condemnation here. No judgment, no condemnation. We just want everybody, we just want everybody to be well. No judgment, no condemnation. Thank you so much, family.
Yeah, once again, what an awesome examination. Y'all, thank you so much, Dr. Buhuro. And thank you, each and every one of you. And like I say, text me and I'll text you the wellness wheel. But once again, as always, please, 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 please share the video. Somebody needs to hear this, and you know it. And you are an ambassador of Jesus Christ. So send out the good news and the information. So share this. And we'll look forward to seeing you on next week.